بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today inshallah we are going to discuss chapter 5, evaluation and the user experience. We are going to cover the materials for about 2 weeks because of the summer short period, but all of them are on the same stream inshallah. First, inshallah, we are going to introduce what's meant by the evaluation and user experience. Then we'll go through some of the details that you can map them to the key basics aspects that we talked about in chapter 1 and chapter 3. Expert reviews and heuristics, usability testing, laboratories, survey instruments, acceptance tests, evaluation during active use and beyond, and we are going to end with controlled psychologically oriented experiment. Okay, let's start with the first one, the introduction. As you should have now know that designers can become so entranced, excited with their creations that they may fail to evaluate them adequately. As a designer, you are creating now an application or a software or hardware, any product. It might be difficult to realize the disadvantages, the failures, the mistakes, the cons of the product that you are creating, as you are tending to feel that it is like part of you as a developer or designer. It is difficult to see your mistakes in general. It is almost in all products that we are dealing with. Think about a simple essay writing, homework, for example, or the assignment for the answers that I asked you to answer for the assignment. So if just you write the answer on your own words, you are not able usually directly after writing it immediately to see what is the mistakes on it, what is the misspelling or grammar mistakes on it. But if you give that essay, that written piece to another person that is going to evaluate or to give you a feedback about it, he might be more able than you to spot the mistakes or the misspellings, for example, and others. It is the same concept, even if they are experienced designers. It is okay that they have gained experience on their field or on the product types that they are designing, but still there is a need for extensive testing and evaluation. There are many factors that influence when, where, and how the evaluation is performed within the development cycle. Some sample factors include the following. It has to be based on the stage of the design, at the early stage or middle or later on. It can be based on the novelty of the project, if it is a well-defined one or it is just exploratory. It depends probably on the number of expected users. If the expected users is large, most probably there is a need for a more repetitive and extensive tests rather than if the targeted users are small. It must it might be based on the criticality of the interface, life critical medical system versus museum exhibit support. So the medical system here is very critical. So it needs more iterative and more careful tests, testing and evaluation than the museum exhibition one. It might be based on the cost of the product and finances allocating for testing. Do we have adequate fund to do the testing, to recruit participants, to take part on our evaluation settings or not? It depends on the time available, the experience of the designers and evaluators, and so on. So, as you may infer that there is a wide range of evaluation plans based on those mentioned factors. It may range from one day test, to 2 years of testing, based on the factors that we have mentioned on this slide and others here. So the range of costs can vary from a small amount to a larger and substantial cost. Testing should occur at different times in the evaluation cycle, ranging from early to just before the release. So it is not enough just to test your product at the early stage of the development, and absolutely it is not recommended and it is not enough to wait for the testing and evaluation until the final stage of the production. It might be too late to do any amendment. Okay, so evaluation for the purpose of usability is very important. Failure to perform and document testings, as well as not heeding the changes recommended from the evaluation process, could lead to failed contract proposals or malpractice lawsuits from users where errors arise that may have been avoided if the problem had been detected and changes made at the early stages. So, what sort of troubles or problems that testing may encounter, may face? One of them is the uncertainty. The uncertainty that remains even after exhaustive testing by multiple methods. So it has to be expected and has to be in mind, and usually there is no perfect product. There is no perfect product. Even after the release of the product, there is a need to test, to review it, and to release batches and updates to cover some fallacies and so on, some errors. So perfection is not possible in the complex of human endeavors. But We need to do our best to test as extensive as we can and as we afford, and we have to make as much as recommendation from the evaluation testing as possible. The second trouble, the second problem here is that even though problems may continue to be found while doing the evaluation testing, at some point a decision has to be made about completing the prototype testing and moving forward to the final design and final product. Most testing methods will account appropriately for normal usage, but in the real practice, in the real performance, there might be other errors, other problems that may occur, that may emerge, that were difficult to predict or to detect while doing the normal testing. For example, here it is difficult to imagine or even apply all different scenarios that the normal or the real usage will encounter. For example, it is difficult to, if we are designing driving wheel, for example, for a car, it is difficult to put the driver while doing the testing under the same exact pressure that the driver may feel while doing the real driving with all surrounding lighting or all surrounding traffic, voices, sounds, and so on, even the emotional feeling. But still, the evaluation testing are critical and are necessary. So the choice of evaluation methodology must be appropriate for the problem or research question under consideration. We need to select the most appropriate method to evaluate our product that simulates the real scenarios of usage. Usability evaluators must broaden their methods and be open to non-empirical methods such as user sketches, consideration of design alternatives, and ethnographic studies. The recommendations needs to be based on observational findings. Producing sketches of possible user interface designs allows more alternative to be explored in the early stages before the design becomes permanent. Usability testing has become an established and accepted part of the design process, but it needs to be broadened and understood in the context of today's highly sophisticated systems. A diversity of users with high expectations are very highly recommended to be included. The consideration of mobile and other innovative devices and platforms and operating systems has to be considered as well, and a competition and speed in the marketplace should be considered as well to reach such a successful product that will be adopted and continue to be used rather than abandoned after a while. So, how can we benefit from expert reviews and heuristics for the purpose of evaluation tests? While informal demos to colleagues or customers can provide some useful feedback, more formal expert reviews have proven to be far more effective. These methods depend on having experts whose expertise may be in the application or user interface domain available on staff or as consultants. Let's take our earlier example about if you have written a piece of work as an essay, for example. It might be helpful if you have given your essay to one of your classmates to give you a feedback or to correct you. It is useful, but it will be more useful if you give that essay to an expert either in the field or generally on English language, right? So the reviews can then be conducted rapidly and on short notice by having the expert walk through the key functionality of the interface using a disciplined approach. The English instructor will be more familiar with the English written essay and will give you a more efficient and effective feedback rather than having a non-English instructor reviewing your essay. Okay, this is the same aspect, the same concept here. Expert reviews entail 1/2 day to 1 week effort. It depends on the sophistication of the product. Although a lengthy training period may sometimes be required to explain the task domain or operational procedures. Expert reviews can occur early or late in the design phase, or both. The outcome may be a formal report with problems identified or recommendations for change. There are a variety of expert reviews methods to choose from. We have heuristic evaluation, guidelines review, consistency inspection, cognitive walkthrough, formal usability inspection. Let's go through each one of them briefly. The heuristic evaluation. First one, the heuristic evaluation. The expert reviewers critique an interface to what? To determine with a short list of design heuristics, such as the 8 golden rules that we talked about on chapter 3, is following or testing or reviewing the interface based on these 8 golden rules, whether each rule is met or not. If it is met, to what extent it is met, is it fully or partially, and so on. It makes an enormous difference if the experts are familiar with the rules and are able to interpret and apply them. Today, there are many different types of devices that may be subject to a heuristic evaluation. And so, it is important that the heuristic match the application. For example, the following heuristics are developed specifically for video games. So consider each one of these heuristics points as a question. Like, does it provide consistent responses to user actions? Yes or no? If yes, to what extent? And so, does this interface allow users to customize video and audio settings, difficulty, and game speed? And so on. Does this interface provide users with information on game status? And so on. These are heuristics evaluation, but they are specifically for video games. We can create or we can use a preset ones from the academia or research or industry to evaluate our interface based on its type and other factors. Okay, what about the second one, the guidelines reviews? The interface is checked for conformance with the organizational or other guidelines documents. If there is relevant organizational guidelines, we need to go, or the expert is required to go through these guidelines and evaluate the interface whether those guidelines are achieved or not. So the conformity with those specific guidelines, with the preset guidelines, is the key factor to be reviewed here. Because guidelines documents may contain 1,000 items or more, it may take the expert reviewer some time to absorb them and days or weeks to review a large interface. So it might be time and general resources consuming. What about consistency inspection? The experts here verify just the consistency. Remember that we said that it is one of the key factors in usability in general, on the design, consistency, to be consistent on all interfaces or all sub-interfaces or aspects. So here the expert will review the interface based on the consistency across family of interfaces, checking the terminologies, fonts, color schemes, layouts, and so on. Large-scale interfaces may be developed by several groups of designers. This can help smooth over the interface and provide a common and consistent look and feel. What about the cognitive walkthrough? Cognitive walkthrough here, the experts simulate users walking through the interface to carry out typical tasks, some of which are high frequency tasks that are going to be started with, but rare critical tasks will be there. So an expert may try to walk through privately and explore the system and take notes of his observations or of his recommendations and problems. Or it might be, which is More recommended a group meeting with the designers, users, or managers, including the expert, to conduct a walkthrough and provoke discussion between the expert and the other team members. What about the formal usability inspection? The experts here hold a courtroom style meeting. It is formal, like official, between like judge and or manager and the team. So they present, the designers present the interface and justify its merits and weaknesses, its pros and cons. And the manager or the judge will either accept or reject some of the designer decisions or practices. Formal usability inspections here can be educational experiences for novice designers and managers, but they may take longer to prepare and need more personnel to carry out than do other types of reviews. So this is regarding the expert review. So expert reviews can be scheduled at several points in the development process, when experts are available and when the design team is ready for feedback. The number of expert reviews will depend on the magnitude, the size of the project, and on the amount of resources allocated. An expert review report should aspire to comprehensiveness rather than making opportunistic comments about specific features or presenting a random collection of suggestions. The evaluators might use a guidelines document to structure the report, then comment on novice, intermittent, and expert features, and review consistency across all displays. Experts even can rank their recommendations by importance. So the high or the very important recommendations are to be met first, and so on, or are to be met completely than the others, or immediately than the others. Okay, so it is like a priority matrix. The danger with expert reviews is that the experts may not have an adequate understanding of the task domain or user communities, but this can be avoided by briefing or debriefing the experts before doing their reviews. Having a number of experts from 3 to 5 can be highly productive to avoid any bias or subjectiveness. Usability testing can offer additional advice and should be used as a necessary complement. Now let's move to the usability testing and laboratories, another way for evaluation. There is a need sometimes to do the usability evaluation within the labs, but that lab needs to be prepared for those sort of laboratories testing. So designers sought the bright light of evaluative feedback to guide their work. Usability laboratories advocates split from their academic roots as these practitioners developed innovative approaches that were influenced by advertising and market research. So controlled experiments here have at least two treatments and seek to show statistically significant differences. Usability tests are designed to find flaws, errors in user interfaces. Both strategies, controlled experiments or usability tests, use a carefully prepared set of tasks, but usability tests have fewer participants, and their outcome is a report with recommended changes as opposed to validation or rejection of a hypothesis in the control experiment. So the usability laboratories usually they make an organization commitment to usability clear, to make the usability clear to employees, customers, and users. A typical, normal, or modest usability lab usually consists of two 10 by 10 foot areas. One area, one room is for or called testing room for the participants to do their work, and the other one, the other room, the other area is called observation room for the testers to and observers even, such as designers, managers, and customers, to observe the participants on the other room while doing or while interacting with the interface. The testing room is typically smaller and accommodates a small number of people, whereas the observation room can see into the testing room typically via a one-way mirror in order to avoid the participants from being under stress as they are being observed or monitored. It is better not to have them look or see the observers in the other room. So that's why it is a one-way mirror, it's called. So the observation room is larger and can hold the usability testing facilitators with ample room to bring in others such as developers, managers, and so on. So this is this guy is set on the observation room, and that lady is on the testing room. She is conducting or interacting with the interface, and this is one of the designer or development team observing her and recording the factors that they are going to test, such as the time to figure out how to do a specific task, the time to uh, take to correct a specific error, or mistake and so on. So the laboratory staff meet with the user experience architect or manager at the start of the project to make a test plan with scheduled dates and budget allocations. Usability lab staff members participate in early task analysis or design reviews, provide information on software tools or literature references, and help to develop the set of tasks for the usability test. 2 to 6 weeks before the usability test, the detailed test plan is developed. It contains the list of tasks plus subjective satisfaction and debriefing questions. The number, times, and sources of participants are also identified. Sources might be customer sites, temporary personal agencies, or even advertisements placed in newspaper to recruit participants. A pilot test, a pilot study of the procedures, tasks, and questionnaires with 1 to 3 participants is conducted approximately 1 week before the test, while there is still time for change. Pilot test mean like trial test, initial test, to verify whether our procedures that we are planning to follow while doing the usability testing is okay, is understandable, is easy to follow, and so on, with just a small sample of the potential participants. The following figures provides a detailed breakdown of steps to follow when conducting usability assessments. They are broken down on 4 steps: plan, analyze, design, test, and refine, and each one of these steps has its own tasks: developing a plan, writing statement, scope of work, and so on. Each one you can go through them by yourself. But it is important to know that it has to be iterative and tested at each step or each stage in order to go to the other one until you reach the test stage. Okay, there is a possibility or recommendation or a way to record participants while performing the tasks in order to give the observers or designers an ample plenty of time to take their notes and do an in-depth analysis at a later stage. Okay, so they can review the recording and even carefully, and even they can notice other matters that they are not able to notice while observing the usability test live. Most usability labs have acquired or developed software to facilitate logging of users' activities like typing, bouncing, reading displays, reading manuals, gaze of eye, tracking, and so on, with the timestamps in order to make it easier to follow and to measure and analyze at a later stage. These are some software examples to do so. Participants may be anxious, may be under pressure, as we said, about the recording process, but within a few minutes they may get used to it. So ethically, there is a need first to take the consent of the participants and written, of course, written consent that they agree to take part on this experiment and they agree to be video recorded and so on. When, for example, one of the things to notice here, when designers see participants repeatedly picking the wrong menu item, they often realize that the label, maybe, or the title or placement needs to be changed of, of that menu item. Another useful technique available to today's usability evaluation professional is eye tracking, that or gaze tracking that I mentioned, hardware or software. To track the gaze, the eyes of the user on display, how they are focused, our menu arrangements and layout is clear, or the eye or gaze of the user is wandering randomly, looking for what they tend to select. The results are displayed in color-coded heat maps of those hardwares or softwares that clearly demonstrate which areas of display are viewed and which areas are ignored. Tobii is one of several manufacturers who develop those eye tracking hardware and software. This is an example. Those red areas, for example, are the areas where the users focused more while interacting with that interface. For airports, kiosks, mobile, and so on. You may attach a camera at the top of the mobile to look at the interaction of the touch or with the touch display closely. We mentioned about the ethics of the research that involves human. If it involves humans, subjects, of course it will, or there will be a need for careful consideration of ethics in research here. You can go through them, and usually there should be like a consent form before starting the experiments with the user that needs to be signed by the participants. Informing the participant that they can withdraw anytime, that this is voluntary, that they are not forced to do so, they are okay with taking the recording, and ensuring them that the outcome of this evaluation test will be used for production purposes or research academic purposes, not for advertisements or anything that may intrude the privacy of them. Also, we have to, of course, treat or deal with the participants with respect, and we should let them be informed about what it is expected from them, what they are expected to see or to deal with, and so on. These are the points that I have just mentioned. You can go through them, we can add to them, or we can remove some of them when necessary. There is another technique that we can use with the users while they are doing their usability test, that is called think aloud and related techniques. We can divide think aloud technique into concurrent think aloud and into retrospective think aloud. Concurrent or normal think aloud, that we invite users to think aloud, to say loudly why they are interacting with the interface, what they are doing as they are performing the tasks. So he said that, for example, now I am looking at how can I add a product into the basket. Okay, I am looking at how can I go to see the basket and remove an item or update it or add an extra item or change the address and so on. So let the participants think loudly, so we can link that with their touches or with their physical interaction with the interface. That might give the designer and the developer a more informative way to interpret and understand what they need to do, what they need to update on that interface. So the designers or testers should be supportive of the participants, not taking over or giving instructions, but prompting and listening for clues. It is highly recommended to have such an informal atmosphere of Think Aloud session to let the participants feel free to say whatever they are thinking about. It has been proven that having two participants working together at the same time produces more talking, more thinking aloud ideas, rather than having just one participant. Another think aloud technique is retrospective thinking aloud. Retrospective thinking aloud. It is the same way or the same thinking aloud concept, but the timing is different. It is letting the user, like silently or without any interaction with us, do the tasks, and afterwards, after completing the tasks, we ask the users to tell us what they were thinking about as they performed this task and the other tasks. So it is like going back on the time to tell them. It is okay in one way to let them focus on the task itself while performing it, but its drawback is that the users may not be able to wholly and accurately recall their thoughts after completing the task. They might forget or they may get confused with other thinking, other thoughts with the other tasks. Okay, we have some other thinking around things like our other titles for these. We can call them concurrent probing and retrospective probing. These techniques both interfere with any traditional user interface measurements and take the participants away from the task at hand, but provide insight into the user's thinking process. The designers are highly recommended to reduce the amount of cognitive load needed to perform a specific task by users. The concurrent probing here is probing participants as they work on tasks. When they say something interesting or do something unique, the researchers stop them and ask follow-up questions, such as not only think aloud, but testers can ask follow-up questions. Why you have done this? But what about if you do this? Okay? The retrospective probing is waiting until the session is complete and then asking questions about the participants' thoughts and actions. There is another thing called the spectrum of usability testing. We don't need to go into details with them, but the following is a list of the various types of it: paper mockup and prototyping, discount usability testing, competitive usability testing, A/B testing, universal usability testing, field tests and portable labs, remote usability testing. Can you break these tests? Just briefly going through each one of them. The paper mockup and prototyping, it is an early usability studies that can be conducted using paper mockups, as we saw on chapter 3, to assess user reactions to wording, layout, and sequencing. Discount usability testing, it is a cost-effective method of usability evaluation based on 3 techniques: scenarios, simplified think aloud, and heuristic evaluation. These often require fewer resources and time than formal usability testing. It can be summative, it can be formative, or summative. The formative, it is why designs are changing substantially during, before, or at early stages of the development. While summative, it is near the end of the design process. The competitive usability testing, it compares a new interface to previous versions or similar products from competitors. A/B testing, it's kind of competitive usability testing, but if we have the same or different options of the same goal, we have 2 options of interfaces for the same purpose. So we are going to evaluate between them which one is better than the other one, or which one is um, more preferred by the user, or which one gain a higher satisfaction rate than the other one, and so on. The universal usability testing, from its title universal, this means that we need to include in the lab test as diverse as possible, a variety of users, of ages, genders, disabilities, and so on, platforms, operating systems, and so on. We need to include them in this in order to have such a universal product. Field tests or portable labs. This testing method puts new interfaces to work in realistic environments or in a more naturalistic environment in the field for a fixed trial period. So we hand the product to the user, to participants, and let them interact and use the product in the real environment for a while, for a week or 2 weeks, 1 month, and so on, and then evaluate and analyze the results afterwards. We have remote usability testing. It is appropriate these days, especially with the web-based applications. We can let the users remotely evaluate or take part on an experiment remotely. The final one, can you break this test? It is like a newly emerged way introduced by game designers that they provide the teenagers with the challenge of trying to beat a new game. Okay? To conclude this usability testing, we need to mention the limitations. And even though that those usability testing may give us a better insight into how the system will be dealt with during the real practice or semi-real practice, there are some limitations. Let's mention just two of them. That one is that it emphasizes first time usage and provides limited coverage of the interface features. We cannot judge a specific interface into the first time usage. As you can see that your familiarity with a new mobile device that you have just bought, for example, is different from the first day than it is after 1 week or 2 weeks, that you get more familiar to it, you know its features and specifications and so on. Okay, the other one, that the usability lab testing come from proponents of activity theory and those who believe that more realistic test environments are necessary. So the test of interfaces used in high stress situations and mission critical domains. So here, creating a realistic environment is critical to adequately test such interfaces, but it is not always possible, unfortunately. The fifth one of the usability testing here is the usability test reports that we need to re register on it. The key points that are observed to understand the audience. The audience usually are the designers or developers or even the managers, decision makers who will be reading the reports and will decide based on it what actions to take and to what extent. These the report format should describe the testing environment, tasks, participants, and results in a standard way so as to enable consumers to make comparison. These are some articles that you may refer to if you would like more information.